Good afternoon, everyone. As I promised, I was going to join within minutes. Thank you very much for taking your time in joining us. I'm going to be giving you a bunch of information here that will help you understand many things in today's world, real estate related. Um, During this webinar, you will hear statistics that have to do with previous issues that Canada had, um, situations like the 2008 recession, how the real estate market reacted to that, and what were the measures that the government helped with to mitigate this impact. Obviously, the real estate industry is one of the most important in terms of the GDP, and it's really taking a toll right now on the income for people. So let's give it a go. Again, once more, thank you very much for taking your time and opening your browsers and joining us. And I hope that you will uh, bring up news and information that will be of your benefit. Now, I'm going to appreciate if you guys unmute uh, your microphone whilst the presentation, and if you have any questions, just write them down. You will have the opportunity uh, to ask at the end of the presentation. Okay, let's give it a go. I'm going to talk a little bit about me. I got my real estate license pretty much 17 years ago. And at that time, real estate was, as has always been, very, very strong. It's something that I am passionate about. Many of you who are listening and looking at this webinar know how much effort I put into helping people. Because after all, this is not a business. This is a relationship. Uh, it's a relationship business in which you get to see a lot of emotions, and it's very important to see that part other than just the money portion. As I said, 17 years in real estate business. I'm a civil engineer. So prior to becoming a realtor for about 18 years, I practiced civil engineering, and I'm sure many of my clients, my past clients, have seen the value in knowing civil engineering applied to real estate, because I'm able to give them advice that perhaps many colleagues have no knowledge about. So that's something that probably even many of my clients didn't know, but I do apply a lot of the engineering to my business. I work with iPro Realty. iPro Realty, it's a large brokerage. We have 16 offices and 1,800 plus agents. So it's a very large office. I work out of the office in Mississauga, but I do have clients all over the southern part of Ontario. Our brokerage has even offices in Kingston, just for those who are living at the east side of Ontario. And well, I love being a realtor. Now, what are we covering today? Pretty much what I'm going to mention is how did all this uh, pretty bad situation started and how it affected real estate. I'm going to mention what is going on in terms of real estate, what portion of the real estate businesses are still going. Uh, I'm going to mention what's in it for buyers, what's in it for sellers. What if I'm a seller? Because I'm sure many of them out there are wondering what to do. Should I buy? Should I sell? Mm, am I getting the money I want? Questions like that will probably be answered along the presentation. But if you feel that you have any additional questions, as I said, just you will be able to write them down in a chat at the end. I will gladly answer them. And if not, just feel free to call us and we'll connect with us and we'll answer. We'll get the answers for you. So how did all start? You know, back in March the 11th this year, um, the World Health Organization decided to declare a world pandemic. Probably many of you had no idea of this term pandemic, but a pandemic is declared when there's a worldwide spread disease. Uh, you know how it is said that it came from this eastern country, then it went to Europe. Very fast, it spread it over these European countries, and it wasn't too long till we got here in North America. So it was in March the 11th. That's probably a date that many of us will never forget and will keep in our minds for the rest of our lives, because this is something that many of us haven't lived in our lifetime. And at that time, then this pandemic started in America. It started affecting us big time. But if we talk about Canada, it was until March 15th. So only within a few days, the government of Canada started issuing restrictions, and they opened this Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. They issued dramatic and drastic travel restrictions like never before, and they start applying this Quarantine Act, which I can guarantee you that many of you had no idea there was one. Well, yeah, there is a Quarantine Act. Also, the government started taking a look at what were the businesses that could be declared as essential, and because of that, many of the businesses that were not essentials had to shut down or close effective immediately. Therefore, we're blessed to know that real estate was declared as an essential business. So that's why uh, it's important to keep this information at your ears, because also some of the data I'm going to give you in regards to ownership, people need to know about their houses. Now, what is going on in terms of real estate? Like what's moving? You know, the industry is one of those in which there are many trades and many professionals involved. But what I'm going to say is that any deals that you guys signed as of March the 15th, that are due to close past that date, you know what? Those deals are meant to close. So that's still ongoing. Those buyers who put offers and they have in a clause a buyer visit, like I usually do when somebody's purchasing a property and I'm representing them, I put a clause to view the property 2-3 times before closing. So these buyers are able to go and take a look at those properties. Any tenant or homeowners who have closing days past this March 15th, they are able to go ahead with the closing. However, the Real Estate Council of Ontario, RICO, cannot control extension. Sometimes people, if they had issues with their mortgages, they have wanted to close afterwards and extend clauses. Well, RICO couldn't control that. That would be up to the buyer and seller, and hopefully, if you had a good realtor, then they would be able to manage the closings or the extensions. Now, obviously, construction, home inspectors, lawyers are working online. Moving companies are able to continue to work, provided that they do have these precautionary measures. Remember the Quarantine Act, and protect with masks, gloves, and their personal protection equipment that would prevent them from getting the infected. Because last thing you want to do nowadays is get any kind of infection that will make you go to the hospital, because the hospital are having their own issues. Now, mentioning about the housing, housing is the single biggest indicator on how fair employment is. What I'm trying to say here is that housing manages at least 34% of the GDP, meaning when housing stops, all these trades, lawyers, moving companies, are affected, and therefore the GDP immediately becomes affected. So that's something no country wants to have. Therefore, those companies are blessed to be still working somehow, and as I said, closings are taking place. Now, let's talk a little bit about Canada and the GDP in relationship with the states. The GDP, it's an indicator that helps know how well the country is. In Canada, the national wealth is $11,500 trillion, out of which 8,700 trillion it's related to real estate or has to do with real estate, and that is not different from the situation in the states. If you see the graph, the red line being the one in Canada, the blue one being the one in the United States. So the GDP in the states also has a lot to do with real estate, which is good news for those of us who are in the industry, and it's really a blessing. And I will mention a few things on the other slide, how important real estate is for Canadian and in regards to ownership. Now, the GDP in Canada is mostly generated by the mining industry, the energy industry, manufacturing and services, tourism, natural resources. Some of these companies are still able to work. Obviously, you know, tourism, natural resources like they came to a stop because of the pandemic. The energy industry is still ongoing, but what I mentioned here underneath by putting down the names Ontario, the provinces of Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, and British Columbia, those are the companies that lead the industry, the GDP in Canada. So I just wanted to highlight that because there's another related graph afterwards. Oh, there it is. So you can see here how in Canada, the provinces of Ontario, this is information from 2018, came up with at least 857,000 millions of the GDP, whereas the second province was only about half, and that is Quebec. And after that, then you have the province of Alberta and British Columbia. So those provinces are the ones who lead in terms of the GDP in Canada. Now, on the right-hand side, you see the real growth for the past 10 years of the GDP. Over there, you see that in 2008, 2009, you guys remember the situation in relationship with what happened with the real estate industry and the mortgage industry in the United States, how that affected the Canadian industry as well. But soon after that, there was a recovery, and we see an average within the last 10 years. So from 2009 and until 2019, we see a GDP averaging around 2.16%, which is fairly good. As I said, back in 2008, there was a recession and the GDP was affected. And in fact, it was negative. We're talking minus 2.93%. In this year, all this economical people who deal with the financing and these actors and people who deal with the economy, they're saying that there's going to be a global contraction of the economy of nearly 26%. And having said that, that's going to affect also Canada, but they say it's going to be about 6% negative in Canada. So we'll see how it goes. Over here, talking a little bit more about the buyers, what I'm showing here is where if somebody's buying, they don't know what to buy. This is showing me it all depends what's your situation in life right now. Reason being is because if you're a young couple, you have no children, you might want to live in Toronto, where you can see how 44% of the properties in Toronto are high-rise apartments. and only 24% are semi-detached. So if you just got married, or if you've been newly married, so you've been married for less than 2 or 3 years, you might have to jump into a single detached home. And if you work in Toronto, you probably want to buy a high-rise apartment. Well, there are plenty over there. But if you're a family and you have kids, you might want to look for different areas. Again, it all depends on things like what you're looking at in regards to the return of the investment. Also, it depends on your workplace, job creation, wherever you plan to buy. Are there jobs being created over there? What are the city plans? All those things matter when you're looking at purchasing a property. Transportation, is there a GO train? Are there GO buses? Highways? Are there schools nearby? How about universities? The growth of the population. Population growth is important, and many towns already have established how many households they're going to allow throughout the year. So this is very important when people are thinking of purchasing a property. Obviously, immigration policies, but I am not too much of an immigrant agent, so I'm not going to go into that. But Canada is a country formed by immigrants. More than 50% of the Canadian population right now are immigrants. So that's also a variable. Now, talking a little bit about sellers, I'm going to mention to you here how the average annual household income in the Greater Toronto area and Hamilton area has increased. In year 2000, we were talking around $25,000, the average household income. Well, right now is nearly 97,000, almost 100,000. In just 20 years, it trebled. And the prediction says that before year 2025, the average annual income household will be around $124,000. That's almost 25% increase within 5 years. So I'm telling you, sellers, if you're scared about selling, you know what? There are buyers out there. And I'm talking about buyers when I mentioned at the beginning how the number of people who are looking after this pandemic. I wanted to thank them because doctors, nurses, medicals, ambulance drivers, government officials, those are the people who are taking the risk. So we want to really thank them. We bless them, and we really wish them the best. There are people out there that are risking their lives in order to protect us from this pandemic. Church pastors, don't forget the IT technologists and technicals and professionals that without them, it would definitely be a different story if we didn't have them. So those people, you know what? They are having to work even extra hours or doubling their shifts. So they have money and they want to purchase, or their relatives. So sellers, don't be afraid. It all depends on what you want to do. But definitely it's going to be a buyer's market, and we'll see shortly, but there are buyers out there. Now, in here, this graph is showing us the comparison between March 2019 compared to March 2020, the number of sales in the month of March alone. Last year, for the month of March, we had a little bit more than 7,000 sales, and this year there were 8,000 plus sales. So, but I'm going to mention here that the situation changed after the first 2 weeks in March. The first 2 weeks in March, they were steady, but the second portion of the month of March this year, meaning between the 15th and the 31st, there was a decrease in about 16% compared to 2019. Now, on the right-hand side, we can see how the new listings also decrease compared to last year on the second portion of the month. Despite that, if you compare the number of listings last year, this is for the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, there were 14,000 new listings compared to 14,424 That's only an increase of 3% on March 2020. So people are still putting their houses on the market. Now, over here, I'm going to insist is definitely a buyer's market. Why? Because there is going to be a very high volume of inventory, and probably it's going to be a small amount of purchaser. Again, those who have been preparing to purchase are going to be able to buy because they have their financing in place. And when there is a huge volume of inventory and a small number of purchasers, then the buyers have the opportunity. It's totally the opposite to when, say, you remember 4 years ago, how there were very little houses on the market and there were a lot of purchases. There were a lot of investors from abroad, and then the market was strong for the seller, and people are purchasing properties with 10, 15, even 20% above market value, which is a rare situation, but that's what it was. But now it's the opposite. So this is the time for the buyers to take your opportunity and go for it. Also, buyers may buy at less than market value for sure, but don't expect it to be 10, 20, or 30% below market value. My take is that it's going to be maybe 10%. It's not going to be market value, but probably maybe 10% under market value. But it's going to depend a lot on who you hire to do the job, to be honest. Of course, buyers will be able to include lots of clauses like their closing, in the offer, they will be able to put the inspection clause that when you have a very strong seller's market, sellers will decide over an offer without a home inspection clause. But this time around, you guys will be able to put this clause, no fear. So go for it. Here then is showing us the average price in the Toronto Real Estate Board of 2019 compared to 2020. This price increased by nearly 100,000, a bit more than $100,000. We'll see the percentage in a bit. And again, this is telling you that people are buying properties. Here, this graph is showing us a little bit on how, what was the behavior of the market the first week in March compared to the second week in March. The average price was for the first week $797, but guess what? The second portion of the month, this is 2019, it came down by $17,000. It was $780,000. Now for this year, the first 2 weeks in March, you can see there that it was 931,000 compared to 862,000 the second part of the week in 2020. That's telling you that there was a percentage change of 10.5% less compared to last year in 2019, that it was only about 2% for the same period of the week. You can see here 797 compared to 780. In here is more dramatic, the change. I told you before that I was going to mention the year-to-year increase on sold properties. It was as of March 2020, we were talking 11.1%. So I'm encouraging you, if you're a seller, just give it a go. Again, just ensure that you hire a good realtor. Now, for the sellers as well, I want to say something here. I wanted to mention what is it that impact price. One of the things that impact the price of a house is the age of the property. It's not the same a 10-year-old home to a 30-year-old home in terms of the age. Obviously, the market, what kind of market we're in, that is going to affect price. As I said, 4 years ago, it was a seller's market. This is going to be more a buyer's market, so that's going to be an affection over there. And obviously, the condition of the property. Have you upgraded, renovated? Have you painted? What about the windows, the roof? Hopefully there is not a leak if you have a house with a basement. So those items are really really important when it comes to price. The location. In the old days, we used to say location, location, location. Well, that still affects price. Is it a good quality of a neighborhood? Are there schools around? We mentioned a little bit before when you're buying something. Transportation, shopping. Ladies would like to know how far is it to go from their household to the closest shopping mall. Okay, so that's going to affect price. Curb appeal. Well, of course, the curb appeal is very, very important. And obviously, I have a statement when I have a client that I'm showing them homes that if the facade, if the front, if the curb appeal is nice, most likely inside the house, it's going to be a nice house. 90% I've been right. So curb appeal is important. And obviously historic sales. The ones that I have highlighted here, market, location, and historic sales, I consider to be the most important to consider in regards to value. But historic sales, I usually go a 90-day period to see what has happened recently in the neighborhood, what sold, what comparables sold. Hopefully, you're working with an agent selling your home. Hopefully, they're showing you the comparables. Many colleagues out there don't bother, but again, I just hope that's not your case. But anyhow, in real estate, there's always money to be made. Over here, I'm going to mention how important your home is. In Canada, this is an evaluation, this is an information that I have here about home ownership. Your home is most likely your most valuable asset throughout your life. So you have to look after it. In Canada, this is the information in regards to ownership. Uh, about 50% of the population own a home. Or, I'm sorry, for the population, the 50% of the population consider owning a home is the most important. And in fact, you will see some figures afterwards, or actually I have them over here, how current ownership average in 2016 is 16%. Now, for all the people, they have different assets and other than the home ownership. And for instance, they have rental properties or other real estate properties, commercial. That's also important in the for the Canadian people or for the inhabitants in Canada. The retirement account, 11%. The stocks and mutual funds, 5 to 6% of the people have mutual funds, and they consider it to be important. Vehicle, more than 5% people have vehicle, but this figure is to say that because a vehicle is something that doesn't increase in value over the years, is not as important for the Canadians. Other interest earnings like equities or businesses is 10%, and some liabilities there that is minus 9% when you invest in stock in like gold and other economical trades that fluctuate with is are kind of more when you want to gamble. Okay, and over here, as I was mentioning, out of 36.7 million Canadians, back in 1999, 60% of the Canadians own a home. Currently, is more than 63%. This information is as of 2016, but that's a huge number. Meaning people definitely own homes. Obviously, you have to also take a look at how much is it to rent a property compared to buy one property. When you look at the mortgage, say for instance, if you're paying $2,000 for your rent, but if you look at how many years have you been living in a property, so let's say for instance it's only 5 years, and if you're paying $2,000 a month, that's $24,000 a year. That I'm sorry, yeah, that's 24,000. But if you're looking at 5 years that you've been living in that place, you're paying more than 100,000. It's like $120,000 that you have paid in rent. When you leave, you're lucky your landlord will thank you. So you have to consider that the rent versus owning is not too different when it comes to the mortgage. Maybe if you make an effort and try, say, $2,300, $2,400 a month for your mortgage, you will become an owner and you will become a lucky owner and part of the 63% of owners. I know as of 2020 is more, but again, it really pays off to purchase a property. Over here, I want to show you how these provinces, I mentioned before, Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. Well, now I want to be a little bit more specific as to the cities in regards to the ownership. In Ottawa, guess what? More than 60% of the people in Ottawa own a property. How about Toronto? Almost 60. Look, 58.7%. Vancouver, 55%, almost 56%. Calgary, 67.5%. So ownership, it's a fact. It's trending. You know, it's good to own a property. Over here on the right, we see some cities in Canada that even the ownership is larger. For instance, in New Brunswick, 70%. Manitoba, 77%. Places like Edmonton, 60%. Saskatchewan, 74%. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's good to own a property. So when you own, you're purchasing. So there is a seller and there is a buyer. So it's good news for everybody. Now, over here, some takeaways for you and conclusions. My consideration is that it's going to be a strong, very strong buyer's market. So buyers will have an opportunity. The financing industry will have to look into credit. And having said so, the interest rates might be lower. So I really encourage buyers to get their financing in place, get prepared to sign offers, work on your financing. If you need help, just give us a call. We'll be happy to help you with that. If you're selling and if you're buying, the good news is it really won't affect you, because if you buy in the middle of a strong buyer market, then you are selling as well. So if you sell low and if you're going to buy, the idea is that the market shouldn't affect you, because what I do usually is make sure that your sale is strong, and I will give you some ideas as to what I normally do, so that there is no gap for negotiation. Okay, so my consideration is if you're selling and you're buying, it doesn't make any difference, because if you're selling a property, your buyer is going to pay big bucks, and if you're going to have to buy, then you're going to pay big bucks as well. That's what I'm trying to say. So it won't affect you. The market cannot affect you if you're doing both transactions. If you're only doing one portion of the transaction, then more details need to be looked into. But I encourage you to sell if you want to sell, if that's what you've been thinking of doing, selling, maybe upsizing, downsizing, you're an empty nester, whatever the case may be. My consideration is that if you're doing both transactions, it shouldn't affect you. Just make sure you hire somebody who is prepared to represent your interests regardless of your situation. Just hire the best of the best, because it's your money after all. Okay. I also want to take a minute to invite you to a next webinar around June the 2nd, in which I will mention some specifics of areas that you could purchase in Southern Ontario, what to purchase, what type of property will get you more equity faster, if that's your idea of purchasing, because you're more interested on the equity. And if time allows, when we meet us next month, I'm going to mention 10 things to avoid before buying a property. That's pretty much taking us to our end. And just as of now, you will have the opportunity to ask us any questions. I'm going to take a look here to see there is a question. Mr. Sebastian, what should I look for in a lucrative investment property? Well, different types of investment properties. Because if you look into commercial properties are, but they have more requirements. For instance, you need more down payment. You have to meet some city by laws, and depending on what kind of property you want to buy. So what happens is that an investment property has different options, different means of looking at it. So investment properties, if it's like a residential, obviously, if you want to do an investment in that regard, I suggest a house that has two separate units, separate entrances. Just be careful because every city has their own restrictions. Of course, enough parking is needed because most likely you will have separate tenants. Sometimes there are triplex are very, very lucrative. They just need a little bit more work, but you will make more money. I see a house here from Stefania. Do you anticipate the value will decrease further as the pandemic progresses? That's a great question, Stefania. I really appreciate your question. Um, the I think the price will go down, as I said, probably no more than 15%, but it all depends on if you are purchasing and you are pre-qualified. It all depends on who's going to be backing you up, who's going to be fighting for you the price. It all depends. If the property is in great shape, there is very little room for negotiation. But if the property is run down and it needs renovation, there's greater opportunity for renovation and for to get a price reduction. So that's my take in regards to um, properties to be decreasing value. It depends on the properties. Um, there is a Mr. Ludwig there with a question. Thank you for your question, Mr. Ludwig. You're saying, how do you anticipate the unemployment impact your market? Yeah, that's a big one. Unemployment, it's going to impact, and I mentioned before how some areas, some professionals are still working. The government is coming up with a whole bunch of reliefs and ideas as to how to lessen the impact because what I try to tell my friends and my clients is the fact that I don't know where to run from Canada. I don't know which country I would go to in this middle of this pandemic. I've heard friends who are ill and they have their wives sick. Uh, Unless it's COVID-19, they call the doctor within hours. The doctor will call back and deliver their prescription. Sometimes the medication is delivered to their homes. So this is a great country to live in. I think we're going to get out of this. And again, I don't know which country I would run to after Canada. Look at the situation south of the border. Probably many people from south of Canada will want to come to Canada. So the people who deal with immigration, I'm sure, are going to have a lot of work this year because a lot of people from all over the world will want to come to Canada. So that's my honest take. I have a question from Paula. Paula is asking, will there be more options or help for first-time buyers to purchase a home? Yes, Paula, thank you very much for asking. The government already has in place several benefits for first-time buyers. For instance, you have the option of getting a good percentage of the land transfer tax, depending where you buy. And also, one thing that the government is doing and is going to help a lot of purchases is in regard with the money. The government is pleading for the financial institution to reduce, and I'm sure they're going to reduce the interest rates. So there it is, your help, Paula. Your interest rate is going to be a lot lower. Give us a call. We will definitely help you with that if you need any help, and refer you to somebody who could guide you through in that process. Let's see if I have somebody else in here. If anybody has any other question, just go ahead and ask. I'll be very happy to answer. I have another question from Mr. Sebastian. Is there a best time of a year wise to buy a property? Well, you know what? the best time to buy a house is now, because the minute there's more options over there, you will probably have more opportunity. However, I would say that it all depends on your motivation. The best time to buy is when you're ready to buy. Just ensure somebody, uh, just ensure that whoever is helping you will be an honest realtor guiding you through in that process, because many people make mistakes when they are purchasing. They think, I will get the advice of a friend, or my neighbor. Nothing wrong with getting an advice of a friend or a neighbor, unless they are professionals. Okay, so so my consideration is that just whenever you're ready to buy. Now, probably past the mid of the year will be more homes, and when there is more homes, there is more probabilities to purchase at a lower price, because there is more competition. But again, there aren't going to be too many buyers, so if you're prepared, you're lucky. So congratulations for that. I don't know if anybody wants to make any other question. Again, our information is there. Mr. Lubin, are the banks having any special conditions due to the current situation? Uh, well, I don't know if you refer to if you're a buyer or if you're a seller. But if you're a seller, yes, the bank is trying to persuade financial institutions uh, to extend for 2 or 3 months the mortgage payments. So in that sense, the bank is helping so people don't lose their homes. So that's a regulatory measure that the government, sorry, is taking by forcing the financial industry, or the banks, the lending industry, to mitigate these owners and not having them to get out of the homes because they haven't paid. It's not that they're not going to pay. They're going to pay. They are moving those payments to the end of their term. And if you are a buyer, yeah, well, the special conditions is going to depend on who is representing you. Your agent should be able to find you the best deal, guide you through in the process, and ensure that if you put an offer, it's going to be benefiting you, right? So that's my take in regards to the options that the buyers have if they are coming from the government. But the government is very protective. As I said, I don't know which country I will run to. This is an awesome country, and we want to protect it. So I have a message from Mr. Orlando Duarte. Okay, yes, Mr. Duarte, thank you very much for your question. Your question is, what's your personal opinion about a depression after COVID-19 pandemic, and how the prices of the properties would be affected? Very good question, Mr. Duarte. Very, very good question. Our office, every 6 months, we do have, like twice a year, we have a business meeting, and we held the one in for 2020. We held it in February 16th, which, by the way, was my birthday. On that day, my boss and the company on this meeting had mentioned that there was going to be a slowdown, but they never mentioned depression. The government had already mentioned that there was going to be some kind of slowdown, but I'm a little fearful of using the word depression. Reason being is that we're not at war. We are a country where, if we talk about mortgages, the government has been so careful to ensure that they learn from the country south of Canada back in 2008 and 2009, when that mortgage disaster happened, and they are still making it up. I don't know. I really don't feel well for the people in south of Canada, because with all these issues coming along, it's going to be tough. But I think Canada is one of those countries that worldwide is going to take the lead on how to get up. Because if everybody starts saying, well, you know what, this is a depression, this is pandemia, this is pandemic, this is dead, then where are we going to, when are we going to get up? So I think Canada is going to lead that process. You can see the Prime Minister every day giving encouragement and establishing new rules and helping people to come along and to get through this. What I'm saying is, we're going to get through this. So yes, depression. I wouldn't call it depression. I would call it, it's going to be a slowdown. I think, in a sense, depression is also on how people look at it. You know, it's a matter of perception. So, but thanks again for your question, Mr. Orlando. Well, I greatly appreciate your time. If I don't have any more questions, again, we will be here to help you if in any regard. And thank you very much for your time. I hope to see you within a month. You will be hearing from me via email. So thank you very, very much. You have yourself a great day, and please be safe. Make sure you wear masks, gloves, and stay at home if you don't need to go outside, because we will get through this. God bless you, and hope you are all well. Thank you very much.